This is The Point, News from Noise, daily market call presented by Kattan Ferretti Financial. I'm your CEO, Brad Roth, and I look forward to having a daily discussion with you over the topics that we present in this note every single morning. So without further ado, The Point.
Good morning, listeners of The Point. Well, Cameron, there's a lot of news out there this morning, and believe it or not, it's not all about the color of Director Comey's undergarments. So why don't you fire away and read off the news for us this morning?
Okay. This morning, economists are steadily removing Trump's projected impacts of infrastructure and tax plans from their estimates of the U.S. growth. Morgan Stanley economists cited little clarity from the administration. However, MS raised growth projections to 2.2% GDP from 1.9% for this year. Renaissance Macro Research said the Big Bang infrastructure plan that people were maybe holding on to the night he won the election, a lot of that is out the door. Billionaire investor Paul Singer, citing no data or figures, is concerned that the system has more debt and leverage than before 2008. And Bill Gross, the famous bond manager, sees the highest risk since '08, though his unconstrained bond fund is only outperforming 22% of its peers and has total return over the last 3 years of only 5.4% versus the S&P at 24.69%. Healthcare and renewable energy jobs are expected to grow the most over the next 7 years. Outside of the United States, the euro area continues to see growth accelerate, reporting 0.6% growth versus 0.5% estimates, and with expectations rising for future growth. In the UK, Royal Institutions of Chartered Surveyors said Britain's housing shortage and continued growth in prices means the property market is showing increasing signs of dysfunction. Novartis looks to have the lead on cancer therapy in which a patient's immune cells are extracted and genetically modified to hunt and kill cancer before being returned to the body, and the FDA is to rule on this in October. Chancellor Angela Merkel is urging Germany's heavy industry to modernize, and as Spain continues to grow, their wages and household investments are low. Japan traded lower after growth was revised lower, and after selling U.S. Treasuries much of 2016, China has been back as a buyer this year. Chinese exports rose more than expected, while Chinese imports were almost twice as strong as economists expected in May. China's e-commerce giant Alibaba expects even stronger growth than analysts have forecasted, stating a target 45% to 49% revenue growth over the next year. The spat in the Middle East continues as United Arab Emirates banned all international flights serving Doha from flying through its airspace amid an escalating diplomatic crisis between Qatar and its Persian Gulf neighbors. And lastly, Moody's loses its appeal against a judgment that found it broke Hong Kong's regulatory code of conduct. So, Bobby, in the market, we're kind of seeing that people don't really care too much about the Trump news, and this Bill Gross guy sees some concern, but how reliable is he?
Well, for decades at PIMCO, Bill Gross was thought to be one of the best bond managers on the planet. Unfortunately, he may have lost his marbles lately. And when he was going through this this interview, he didn't look well. He didn't look confident. And when you see that he sees all these risks, but his return over the last 3 years is only 5.4% versus 25% for the S&P 500. I think he'd be making up some, excuses too. So, again, it's not a matter of whether or not the market will pull back from these highs. It's a matter of being insightful as to when it'll happen and charting data points and not talking your own book, not having conflicts of interest. So, when understanding, he's a bond manager, so comparing him against the S&P 500 is, which is a lot more risk and a lot more growth, but people with their money invested are still wondering why they've seen next to nothing as a return. So be careful when you hear famous people say things. Think about whether or not they have conflicts of interest. Think about what numbers they're actually giving you, what data they're actually giving you. I mean, his unrestricted bond fund, which is pretty much him with all the restrictor plates off, is only outperforming 22% of its peers. I mean, if we were talking about baseball, that would put you in second to last place in your division, right? I don't know that we'd be paying too much attention to what, other than for entertainment, to what disgruntled players in that field would state. So, and I think it's really interesting. The Morgan Stanley comments saying, okay, well, into the election last year, into the beginning of this year, we thought maybe there's a chance for growth to accelerate because Trump will have a much more, market-friendly tax plan. He's got control of Congress, so they should be able to move this stuff through, which isn't happening. He's got infrastructure plans, which would see like $1 trillion entering the economy. Hopefully that would have wage inflation attached to it. Wages would go higher, or especially at the low end, of the income bracket. But none of that's happened, so you get the call right that growth would accelerate in the United States. He's got the reason entirely wrong. So to go out there and say, hey, our two biggest catalysts for growth, the tax plan and infrastructure plan, they're not going to happen. But we're revising our growth higher. Well, what does that say? Well, it speaks more to things like the article this morning on Novartis, right? More innovation, talking about cancer treatment, and coming this October, having things being put in front of the FDA. It speaks to all the competition in the tech sector and innovation in the tech sector. It speaks to the real economic growth and the fact that, honestly, it's going to be really entertaining today, sure, to see Comey's comments. But I know, and I would get into a little bit more on China today because I think there's some interesting things going on there. But you and I are on our way to Pittsburgh here shortly to record the weekly podcast with our guest David Iwinski, who's an expert on China. So we'll save some of that input for there. But on our way down, Cameron, I'm telling you what, we're listening to a podcast because I'm not listening to any more news about Comey. We already know what he's going to say. We already saw the testimony. Markets do not care about it. Let's get back to focusing on what's making this economy grow, why prices are where they are, what are numbers and data behind it. I think Jay-Z said it best, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So let's get into listening to economists who are talking about numbers and make sure we stay focused on, not just the direction of growth, but what is the rate of acceleration and when will the market pull back, right? Not what are the problems, but when. How do we time that? So what are you seeing in the sports world today?
Over on the sports side, the Warriors defeated the Cavaliers 118-113 after a late fourth quarter rally to take a 3-0 series lead. Game 5 between the Predators and the Penguins is tonight in Pittsburgh, as the Penguins are still yet to name a starting goaltender. Oklahoma's head football coach Bob Stoops has decided to step down after 18 seasons and is replaced by offensive coordinator Lincoln Riley, as NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is considering altering the NBA draft requirements to rid of the one-and-done philosophy that has become so popular in college.
No kidding. We didn't name a starting goaltender for tonight.
Not yet, no.
My goodness. What's your bet on?
I think they got to stick with Murray, too.
You got to stay on and stay with Murray. I agree 100%. We all love Fleury, but we got to stick with Murray. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to The Point this morning. It is June 8th, Thursday. It's Thursday, right, Cam?
Yes, sir.
Thursday, June 8th. Tune in tomorrow. Thanks a lot.